Welcome back to Studio 10. Well, our next guest is the highest-ranking transgender female military official in the world. Lieutenant Colonel Cate McGregor is also an author and cricket commentator. She was even named in the Australian Women's Weekly's 50 Most Powerful Women. To top that off, she has an Order of Australia Medal for exceptional service to the Australian Army. Please welcome Cate McGregor to Studio 10.
Catherine, welcome to our show. You're now in the Royal Australian Air Force. You're a group captain.
Yes.
You're the chief speechwriter.
Speechwriter and director of research to the Chief of the Air Force, Air Marshal Jeff Brown, and loving every minute of it.
Did you change? From the Army to the Air Force because you were experiencing some kind of discrimination?
Not at all. Not at all. My experience in the ADF has been exceptionally good across both services. I've been well received by my colleagues and superiors. I had a fabulous time. It was a very personal decision to move when I chose to move. I had always intended to go at the expiry of General David Morrison's term, which was due to be last July, and I started to make plans on that assumption. His term was extended, but I'd reached a point where I thought I wanted to make a fresh start. Army were fabulous, and so was he in particular. But when you've made the seismic shift in identity that I had, I felt like I wanted to work somewhere where no one had known me before. It just felt as though to express my gender, my affirmed gender the way I wanted, a fresh start was in order. And because I'd spent so long around the military, I didn't have to erase all my past experiences to make a transfer. So I went into a new environment and I found it really wonderful, frankly. Well,
you were a boy from Toowoomba. You were a cricketer, a rugby player. You've been in the forces, you had a distinguished career. What is it about being a woman? I mean, there came a point in your life where you felt you couldn't go on being who you were, even though you were diagnosed as transgender, something like 26 years before you came out and admitted it. What is it about being a woman that's so, well, I know it's wonderful, but why is it wonderful for you?
Well, I have experienced every day since I transitioned as bliss, basically. And that's not to say it hasn't had ups and downs. But there's two things. I think if you are a woman, and I consider myself as a trans woman to have been a woman all along, and I've only been able to express that later in my life. I transitioned at 56. It was really late in the day.
But it was a big decision, wasn't it?
Huge decision.
So when you came to that decision, what was it like?
Well, scary. And it was interesting. I just had a quick chat to Carol as she went. She's from a generation that did it really hard. You know, it was dangerous, it was confronting, it was very hard to be in mainstream life as a trans woman when Carlotta made her decision. I'm of a different kind. There are different kinds of categories in this, I found. The psychiatrist would tell you Carlotta was a primary transsexual. She never wanted to be a boy. She got that really early and she had the courage to do something about it. There's a category that I belong to that's actually not an insignificant portion of the population that are categorised now by psychs as natal males, meaning we're born male, female identified, meaning we feel female, but we're heterosexual, so we kind of get mixed messages to ourselves about our orientation and so on. I came from an incredibly conservative town in regional Queensland in the 50s and 60s. So I just thought something was wrong. I never rounded the circle out and made the deductions. And kids are desperate to fit in. So I did everything I could to try to make myself conform to what I hoped were my parents' expectations. And I excelled at a lot of guy things. It's not uncommon with trans people to do that, to go to quite extreme lengths. And I did. I ticked every box. You know, I was a military officer. I went to the infantry, which is a combat arm. I played serious sport. I did male things. But the externals didn't change how I felt inside. No amount of external achievement changed my feelings. And at a certain point in your life, I think you either die or you become yourself. So the best part...
You're transgender, but are you heterosexual? Because you said...
Well, I'm technically a dyke.
Yeah. Very interesting. Very interesting combination of people in one person.
I've always liked women and I still like women. And as I said, I think on Australian Story, I love one woman and it's the one I actually married way back.
And obviously that marriage came to an end.
Well, it kind of did. We're not living as a married couple, but we're still the closest person in the world to one another. whenever something happens in either of our lives, we're the first one to speak to the other and so on, and we're the beneficiaries of each other's wills, and we care deeply about one another. But clearly it was a tough, really hard experience for her as well, to lose the husband she thought she was going to grow old with. Traumatic for her. It's the only thing I grieve about my old life. It's the one loss that I grieve every day. I feel sad about it. But we're still really close. And when you I talk too much, but closing out what's the best thing about being a woman, it's the fact that it's being me. The fact I didn't realise how much of the background noise in my life evaporated when I expressed my gender as me. And there's a calm and a joy in me that just wasn't there before. And that promo footage you showed of me getting the Order of Australia, that should have been the proudest day of my life. And I was standing there rooted to the spot at Government House. I was having a panic attack, actually, and I couldn't breathe, and I was really worried that when Quentin Bryce handed me the medal, I wouldn't be able to turn around. I was kind of glued to the spot, having a kind of hyperventilation episode. It was just hideous. I couldn't get out of there fast enough. That was about 3 weeks before I commenced transition, and I haven't looked back. And it's had its ups and downs, as I said, but it's been a beautiful experience. Worst bit about being a woman is the entire industry devoted to removing body hair. Either the bit on top doesn't behave properly, or the bits that you don't want are too hard to get rid of. And that kind of has been a shock. The amount of time I now spend worrying about how I look is exponentially greater than before.
There's nothing easy about being a woman.
I don't want my money back, but I got to tell you, I was a bit surprised at the amount of...
We're going to take a break, Sarah.
Yeah, welcome to the club, sister. It's tough being a woman. We're going to hear more of Cate McGregor's fascinating story right after these very short messages. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back. Aisha now continues her fascinating chat with Cate McGregor.
Catherine, we've chatted about your army career, how you're now a group captain in the Air Force. Clearly you had a lot of high-ranking support for your transgender change. But in everyday life, in the Australian community, what's it like there? Is there an acceptance?
My experience has been overwhelmingly benign, and I need to focus on that. I transitioned into really alpha male environments, the military. And the military, of course, being a Commonwealth body, is bound by discrimination law and so on. And so there was always a structure in place. Even people who may have disapproved got on with it and just did their job and treated me as a colleague. I've had no incidences at work that have bothered me. Cricket was more challenging.
We just should explain that. You comment on cricket. You're a commentator. You also write about cricket.
I do, yeah, and I played a bit, and I still play, actually.
That's a very blokey world.
It absolutely is, and that was going to be the biggest challenge, because whether I succeeded or failed in cricket was very much up to the goodwill of people. And I was humbled at the response I got. I could run off a list of the great names in the game who personally took an interest in me. No one made more of the most beautiful message I got in the whole journey was from Rahul Dravid, the captain of India, just a living legend and a beautiful man. And I've since got to work with him on air. Harsha Bogle, Jim Maxwell, Kerry O'Keefe, you know, the Chappell brothers, Brett Lee.
Have they said you're not a bad-looking Sheila?
They're kind of awkward. What guys do, especially alpha blokes, tend to back away like Seinfeld on the Close Talker, Kramer on the Close Talker episode, and go, "You're looking really well," because there's still a bit of an inhibition. You know, it's a bit like the Ricky Gervais thing of "I'm not gay," so they don't respond to you in that way particularly. But I've been treated superbly by cricket, and I couldn't be happier with that. Haven't had a bad incident in cricket. I've had some online abuse. I responded badly to that. I shouldn't have bitten, and I've seen it's
Sticks and stones.
It's just pointless responding.
See, it seems to me that you've been very well accepted.
I have.
So given that, why do you think it's so difficult to get marriage equality for the gay and lesbian community?
It's a good question. I think, you know, trans is a very polarising thing because there's a huge social investment in binary gender structures. There just is, you know, it's the way we're conditioned, and it's very subversive for a man to present as female, you know, and it hits a lot of insecurities. As for marriage equality, I think it's inevitable. I think it, you know, I can feel the shift happening now. And I just want to say something important here, actually. Of all the people who made a difference to me, and this is not a fashionable position to take, but Tony Abbott was incredibly kind to me when I came out. We'd known one another a very long time. He was one of the last people I told because I didn't think he'd cope. No one was more gracious in accepting me. He's never once misgendered me. He never once used my old name, not even by mistake, which is a really big thing with, you know, men who've known you a long time tend to sometimes subconsciously call you by your old name or do stuff.
Yeah.
We've discussed same-sex marriage as mates. I understand the imperatives. You lead a Conservative Party with some very religious people on its right wing. His room for manoeuvre, I suspect, is quite limited. I don't know that a coalition government can ever do it. I suspect in our life, well, I certainly think within the next 5 to 10 years, same-sex marriage will become a reality around the place. It's happening in some very conservative American states. It'll happen here.
I just want to go back to those tweets you talked about,
Yeah.
you know, the transphobic tweets. I mean, obviously they did say some pretty unkind things,
Yeah.
and you said you reacted badly, but, you know, how tough was that? And what sort of offensive things did they say to you?
I actually don't even repeat some of it and acknowledge them, but it was putrid stuff, you know, going on about, you know, my genitals and putting up, one idiot put up a photo of me as a woman next to Jack Nicholson as the Joker and said which one is the army officer in lipstick and all this kind of stuff. And, there, you know, but I see now, I follow a lot of female media people and see that what I get as a trans woman actually qualifies me to be part of the female club. You know, the putrid stuff that gets written about women in the media who stick their head up is it just taps a deep vein of vile behaviour. A lot of them tweeting under phony names. The people who attacked me used their real names. They're still out doing it. In the end, I think that when you're obsessed by someone else, your life is miserable. And I'm really happy to just get on with living my life. I'm in a great place. And if they want to spend time at their keyboard all day obsessing about me, good luck to them, frankly. Means they leave other people alone. I've got a life to live. But look, some of it was quite appalling, frankly. And from so-called Christians, it was very much lacking in any kind of sense of compassion or love or seeing me as a child of God, as they constantly reminded us.
I used to get letters from concerned Christians when I was chairing the National Advisory Committee on AIDS, pleading for tolerance for people who had HIV. Concerned Christians can be very vile.
I've been stunned at it, and I was a believing Christian right up to the day I started on this journey. I would now consider myself spiritual rather than religious. I don't have a confessional affiliation any longer, but I don't attack people of faith because of that, because I know many people who do respond well, but there is a sect within fundamentalist Christianity who don't treat gay, lesbian, trans people as human beings. And they can bang on, they can talk to God in Latin or do whatever they want to do, but don't pretend you love your fellow human being when you treat anyone the way they treated me.
I want to thank you, Catherine, for coming on Studio 10 today and sharing your story with us. It's been absolutely fascinating.
What a woman. We are so proud to have you on our show, Catherine. Thanks for coming in.